Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stephenkingcast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King.
Each week, I'll review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication, which takes me to this week, in which I get to examine not one of Stephen King's books, but one of his most widely known movies, the star-turning experience that provided Kathy Bates a well-deserved Oscar win, the non-stop thrill ride of Rob Reiner's return to the world of Stephen King. Rob Reiner, who had created Castle Rock Entertainment as a tribute to the author, who had spectacularly delivered The Body to the screen as Stand By Me, and here he does the same for King's ultimate statement of fandom, and that, of course, is 1990's Misery. As adaptations go, this one is up there. It was nominated for awards, it made a star out of Kathy Bates, it reminded us that James Caan's skill set is certainly spectacular, and that Rob Reiner was more than just a meathead. It's a lean, tight thriller that keeps us as trapped in our seats as Paul to his bed, and has probably one of the most famous scenes from any movie, period. Now, before I get any further, I would like to read a a couple reviews that just showed up on iTunes a few days ago. So, thank you to the following people who decided to just write these reviews and take time out of their busy lives to just help me out here. So, this one says, only listened to a few eps so far, but I already very much enjoyed this podcast. Loved the revival review. I liked how this got bumped up to the top, didn't have to wait, and I think it's a cool idea to review the movies along with the novels. Really enjoyed the analysis of Revival and Gunslinger. Host seems to have a literary background, and looking forward to what's next. A great companion for any constant reader. So thank you. That's Stuviepox. Thank you so much. And the next one is Can't Miss for SK Fans. I absolutely love this podcast. Love your insights into the books and movies. My fave part of each episode is the Kingisms, but I wish that you would add a short section on Easter eggs since all of his works are connected, which I took this into account, and it will first appear in the Tommyknockers review. My favorite podcast moment is your dog snoring in the Shining movie episode. Gave me the giggles and reminds us that you do the podcast in your free time because you love SK, not for any other reason than to help expand the fandom. Keep it up. Thank you. And my dogs, one more so than the other, is determined to become the official co-host of the Stephen King cast. She's the more demanding one of the two. But thank you both for writing in, and anyone else out there. I don't know how you consume the podcast. I don't know if you go through Stitcher or SoundCloud. I don't know if you go to the Podbean site. But if you go to iTunes and subscribe and write a review, it really would help out really getting the word of the Stephen King cast out there to expand the listener base, because with every subscription and every review, it bumps it up in search engines and the library listing, so that would really help me out. Anyway, back to Misery. I am going to just, as I've done with all the other movie reviews, I'm going to just read my commentary, my running thoughts as the movie plays out. So, Castle Rock Entertainment logo, it just flashes across the screen, and for any Stephen King fan, it's as cool as the Marvel Studios production logo at the beginning of whether it be Iron Man or Thor, or any of the Marvel movies, or the DC flip for the Batman and Man of Steel, and soon to be coming up Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. But just seeing that, it's such a nice not tribute, but just an acknowledgement that you're about to get something that's made by people that love the source material. So we begin not with the painful aftermath of the car crash the way that the novel started, but as Paul Sheldon finishes his novel. It's an untitled work, unlike his book counterpart, which titled the manuscript Fast Cars. With the book complete, we get the post-novel celebration of a cigarette and a bottle of champagne, which I'm glad that Rob Reiner and writer William Goldman include up front, because it comes around at the end of the movie as well. We then see him cruising through the winding Colorado roads. Now, it's great to see in The Shining, and it's great to see here. You can read about it and imagine it all you want, but until you see the dangers that come with these roads, the imagination sometimes can't do reality justice. And as the snow begins to fall, you become very aware of how windy those roads actually are. And when Paul grabs a hold of his manuscript, you see how much it matters to him. It tells us so much about the character. Seconds later, the car crashes, and while the wind blows cold snow onto our overturned car, that's when the screen devilishly reads, directed by Rob Reiner. Because the novel took place inside Paul's head, we were able to get information naturally. Now, we don't have that luxury here, so while Paul's car is overturned, we get a flashback to a meeting with Lauren Bacall, his agent, and in the conversation we learn about the success of the Misery novels and his dreams of freeing himself from that genre. As he talks about what he'd like to see on his tombstone, Reiner cleverly cuts back to his car, which he is then rescued from. There's blood, but it doesn't look that bad. I'm not a proponent of gore if it doesn't fit or if it's not needed, but I think there was an opportunity here for him to be messed up, because in the book, Paul is messed up. And then we meet Annie, expertly portrayed by the always top-notch Kathy Bates, who looks so young in this movie. Present-day Kathy Bates, she now carries this gravitas. She has a real regal stature about her. And then with this Annie, despite the fact that she's our villain and we see how dangerous she is, 1990 Kathy Bates has this vulnerability that I just don't think that she has now. And her voice, soft and kind, is a perfect way to meet this character who comes across as a much more pleasant and sweet than her novel counterpart, who was almost immediately characterized by her insanity. We then see how mangled Paul's legs are, and we need to see them that way to know that they're not just broken, but thoroughly destroyed. Now, again, while they don't measure up to the level of destruction from the book, it's still effective. And then Reiner holds the scene. There's this one particular moment where Paul's in bed, and Reiner holds the scene for a moment before cutting back to New York. Holding the camera on Paul not only shows Paul's immobility, but gives us a reference shot of the room. It's important that we have the opportunity to soak it in. Because we're going to be spending so much time with it, we need to feel that we are there with him, that we know that room inside and out. Now, Reiner and company made the decision to deviate from the novel in the sense that the book focused only on the interaction between Paul and Annie. Any interruptions came from excerpts from either Fast Cars or Misery's Return. Maybe they decided that they didn't want to stretch the story or make the audience get restless by containing the film to just one location with only two characters. Now, on one hand, I think audiences today would accept it because forcing us to remain in the room with Paul would only cause us to empathize with him that much more, and the sense of claustrophobia would only reinforce the tensions of the story itself. Think about the episode of Breaking Bad entitled Fly, which can be, it was just 1 hour between two characters in the meth laboratory. Single location stories can be done. It might drag at times, and the lack of diversity might result with an at times grueling experience, but it can be done. Now, with that said, I completely understand why Reiner and screenwriter William Goldman made the decision that they did. It allows for us to experience the character of Buster, the kindly old sheriff who sniffs around the author's disappearance. The movie allows us to see what had occurred off-page in the books when the world rallied in an attempt to find Paul. We only got to see Paul think about people looking for him. Here we actually get to see it. And with Buster, though he may look like a small-town, low-level cop, he has a twinkle in his eye and a curious spirit that speaks of a sharp mind. We cut back in with Annie and Paul, whose vulnerability is clearly displayed as Annie states that she was following him while she shaves his face with a straight razor. The sense of danger begins to grow. Here, Reiner and Goldman include an aspect to the story that King hadn't included. Annie knew where Paul was staying and had been stalking him. Reiner and Goldman didn't tip their hand yet. Paul doesn't realize how dangerous Annie is, and neither do we. Paul lets her read the manuscript as a genuine sign of gratitude for saving his life. Annie is thrilled, ecstatic, and we don't get a sense of the danger that lurks below. As Annie feeds Paul, we can tell that something is wrong. She's struggling with telling Paul some feelings that she's having with the newest novel. She then starts going off about the profanity, working herself up as the camera closes in on her face and the music starts to build. She spills soup on the bed. She says, "See what you made me do?" She then tells Paul that she loves him, and Paul's face as she leaves says it all. What once looked like a guardian angel may in fact be the devil at the door. Buster continues his investigation, revealing a frisky side to his wife Virginia, and their banter is both fun and heartbreaking when you think about what happens. It's necessary in fattening Buster up for his ultimate slaughter, though. It makes Annie that much more of a monster when she takes out a character that you've come to love. When Annie comes home thrilled with the new Misery book, she dodges the topic of calling an outside line. Despite the fact that Paul talks about his daughter and how worried she'll be, Annie deflects, and we again start to grow worried. Again, nearly as soon as we meet Annie in the book, Paul knows that she's crazy. Here, we get the sense that she's off. We know that she's not low, but of poor taste. And when she starts talking about the problems she once had and how much she owes Misery for helping her through the problems, we know that Paul is not in a good place. And then she turns. It's great when it happens. Paul wakes up in the middle of the night, the moonlight streaming through the window, Annie hovering over his bed like a ghoul, shrieking at him and manhandling the bed. She destroys a plant and some furniture, and she drops the bomb. She hasn't called anyone, and Goldman makes it clear to Paul and us that if anything happens to her and she dies, then so does Paul. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Annie Wilkes. It's on. Paul doesn't waste any time, and as soon as Annie leaves, he tries to escape. It's a necessary scene in showing just how vulnerable and fragile he is. It's painful to watch him tumble out of that bed. When his legs smash against the ground, we feel it. He's just a door away from safety, but he realizes that it's locked. Regardless, the attempted escape tells us about the tenacity of this character. He doesn't think about what's going to happen if he got out of the room or where he would go. He just needs to go, and will do anything he can to get away from Crazy Town. Annie discovers Paul on the ground and helps him back into the bed. Both actors have to do so much with this scene, and both pull it off so well. We have to see Annie's strength, and we have to see Paul's pain. Furthermore, when Paul asks Annie to stop and she doesn't, it's everything that we need to know. And they just keep layering it, referencing Annie on the witness stand. In one of the most painful scenes, in a movie filled with painful scenes, she forces Paul to burn the book. It's this type of punishment that shows us that there are many ways to hurt a man, and it's hard to watch. Paul does everything he can to get out of the situation, but Annie isn't having any of it. And then Annie starts squirting the lighter fluid on the bed. Paul lights the flame, and he does it. He burns the manuscript, and he watches a part of himself go up in flames. Reiner and Goldman made the decision to keep Annie's goofiness completely intact, and I, for one, am glad. In the lesser hands of lesser storytellers, they would have made her one-dimensional, forceful, and evil. Here, she refuses to swear, and she's just so goofy. It adds a dastardly dash of comedy, forcing you to either laugh or chuckle in scenes that you know that you shouldn't be. The burning of the book is rewarded with more painkillers, which Paul decides he's going to try and quit. He might be confined to a bed, but his mind is still sharp. He tears a small hole in his bed and uses it to store his novril. Paul is then introduced to the wheelchair, the typewriter, and the fact that he will now be forced to write Misery's Return. James Caan plays Paul wonderfully. Despite the fact that he's at the mercy of a lunatic, maybe because he's at the mercy of a lunatic, he has an edge to him, but knows when to rein it in, buttering her up in the hopes that she'll understand that she bought the wrong paper. He understands enough about her to know that she'll need to be treated as delicately as possible, but soon learns that it doesn't matter how delicately he treads, he's still walking on the thinnest of ice. James Caan sells Paul's vulnerability like a champ, writhing in agony as Annie slams the paper on his lap. And the simple act of trying to grab a bobby pin is more tense than most million-dollar action scenes in a modern blockbuster. Paul manages to escape the room, and we get a sense of the rest of the house, learning about Annie with the decorations around the house. He finds the phone, but it's a tease, a metaphor for Annie herself. It looks functional, but is hollow inside. In the book, the tension started right away and never let up. It's around this scene where the tension kicks into high gear, slowly wheeling himself throughout the house. He needs to be careful not to knock anything over. Reiner continually cuts back to Annie, leaving the store, driving back to the house. Paul makes it to the kitchen, sees the exit door, can't get through the door frame, crawls to the door. What's going to happen? Will Annie find him like this? Will he have time to get back to the chair? Or to his room, for that matter? He hears a car coming, and again, the tension is unbearable. He races to the wheelchair, manages to get back, and Khan sells both the desperation and the intense pain his character is going through. It's insane how much tension Rob Reiner milks from this scene. It's an example of less is more. You don't need big effects or an overcomplicated story. Reiner shows what you can do when you create a clear conflict between two well-established characters. Paul begins writing, and soon after, Annie comes in to correct him. It's brutal. Not only is she shackling him to the room, she's also shackling his creativity. With that said, just as she does in the book, she does have a point. And Kathy Bates delivers the cliffhanger monologue about the old serial movies that she saw as a kid, correctly putting Paul in his place, and gets to scream, he didn't get out of the cock-a-doodle car. My line reading does not do it justice, so I'm just going to play the actual clip from the movie. But just, all joking aside, just watch how she builds and builds and builds within this scene.
When I was growing up in Bakersfield, my favorite thing in all the world was to go to the movies on Saturday afternoons for the chapter plays.
Cliffhangers.
I know that, Mr. Man. They also call them serials. I'm not stupid, you know. Anyway, my favorite was Rocket Man. And once it was a no-brakes chapter. And the bad guy stuck him in a car on a mountain road and knocked him out and welded the door shut and tore out the brakes and started him to his death. And he woke up and tried to steer and tried to get out, but the car went off a cliff before he could escape. And it crashed and burned, and I was so upset and excited. And the next week, you better believe I was first in line. And they always start with the end of the last week. And there was Rocket Man trying to get out. And here comes the cliff. And just before the car went off the cliff, he jumped free. And all the kids cheered. But I didn't cheer. I stood right up and started shouting, "This isn't what happened last week! Have you all got amnesia? They just cheated us! This isn't fair! He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodle car!"
I mean, you can tell just how much fun Kathy Bates has with this role. Just look at the scene. I'm going to play another clip because it cracks me up. But, the way she spins around in glee when Paul gives her a better version of the story after her corrections. Her childlike glee and her choice of celebration is hilarious. I just don't know how the actors kept a straight face when she's talking about romance and then celebrating by putting on Liberace. So I'm just gonna play it.
Oh, Misery's alive! Misery's alive! Oh, it's so romantic! Oh, this whole house is gonna be filled with romance. I'm gonna put on my Liberace records.
Looking for an escape? Try Ghosts in the Burbs, a podcast that began as a collection of stories about the people of Wellesley, Massachusetts, and the ghosts and monsters who haunt them, and expanded to include cozy scares in other suburban settings. Ghosts in the Burbs is written by me, Liz Sauer. These stories include no gore, no extreme horror, and no ads, ever. Just cozy, creepy escape. Find Ghosts in the Burbs wherever you listen to podcasts.
Now, I thought I saw pictures of Liberace in her house when Paul was wheeling around. Now, it's been so long since I've seen the movie that I don't recall the Liberace aspect, but it's just a little bit of a character trait that just really cracks me up. Paul invites Annie to dinner in order to seduce her. It's a scene that was added, and it's a good one. Paul drugs her drink, and we wonder what's going to happen from it. It gets us out of the room for one. It shows Paul's brains, and again, it ups the tension. When Annie spills the drink, the look on his face says it all. And when they toast to misery, it's with a wink to the audience. We have a montage that shows us the passage of time and that Paul has been using the typewriter as a weight to get stronger. Upon the conclusion of the montage, Annie enters the room disheveled and depressed. The filmmakers and Kathy Bates, of course, have done an incredible job at demonstrating her mood swings. She pulls a revolver from her pajama pocket. We're reminded of the danger and unpredictability of this character. Like Paul, it's easy for us to forget how dangerous she can be. We can get swept up in the kind and batty Annie, right? She's so nice and giving at times that it's easy to forget the tornado version. While she's away, he sneaks out and grabs a knife. We still have a half an hour to go, so there's a possibility that he might be able to use it. For first-time viewers, that is. It's wise to include it later in the movie than earlier. If he had grabbed the knife, say, during his first exploration, we know that he wouldn't use it because it's too early in the movie. But it doesn't work out. Paul awakes to a stone-faced Annie and an appropriate lightning strike. She injects him with something, and the next thing we know, he's strapped down and Liberace plays in the background. We learn that Annie knows that he's left the room. As Liberace tickles the ivory, Annie monologues while Paul quietly panics. Now, okay, I don't know how to talk about this scene, to be perfectly honest. Because this is not just the most famous scene from this movie. I mean, this is one of the most famous scenes from the history of cinema. I've been, just like typing. I've been typing my notes as the movie's been playing along, and I had to stop the film, just to kind of frame this scene and really just think about it for a second. And I realized that more than like any other scene in the 40 something podcast reviews I've recorded so far, it's this particular scene more than any other one that I was worried about screwing up. I first of all, I mean, whatever I say about it has already been said, and I don't really think that words can encapsulate why it just works so goddamn well. I mean, talk about A-game. I mean, everyone involved in this scene knows that this is it. I mean, this is the moment right here. James Caan knows it. He shows it in every, struggle, against the cords, the futile struggles against the cords. They're strapping him against the bed, and just that slow, dawning realization that what he thought has been hell has been heaven, and that hell is about to come. And then Kathy Bates knows it by being all the more chipper to play against the increasing dread, and that creates this this push pull, of her positivity, combined with the growing threat and the tension, and it keeps us off guard the entire time. It does such a good job at placing us firmly in Paul's perspective. Now I don't know if it's the music supervisor or the sound supervisor, whoever chose the music. That person has to be on their A game, and they know that they have to set the score just right. And Rob Reiner knows that this is the scene that people are going to talk about. This, I guess to frame it the right way. I mean, when he read the book, he knew that this was going to be his "here's Johnny" moment. It's his prom scene from Carrie. Call it what you will. I would argue that at the end of the day, I mean, when you compare the most famous Stephen King cinematic moments, I mean, this one is right up at the top of the pile. I mean, I would say that, like I said, Here's Johnny might be his most famous in terms of just, live action adaptations, even though it was a TV miniseries. Hiya Georgie, they all float. That's definitely one. But I don't know, man. I think that maybe this could be the number one Stephen King cinematic moment. I think that this is the one that's on top of the pile. It's so well done. I mean, this is a masterclass at how to tell a story in acting, in screenwriting, in direction, in sound. It has, like I said earlier, everyone right at their A game. And And it's told with Rob Reiner. I mean, he tells it with his own spin, because in the book, if you haven't read the book or didn't listen to the podcast review last week, I mean, in the book, the hobbling is not a hobbling by sledgehammer. The hobbling is a hobbling with an axe and a blowtorch to cauterize the wound. It's actually a funny inverse of the change to The Shining, in which Stanley Kubrick chose an axe rather than a mallet. I think that actually both decisions, Stanley Kubrick's and Rob Reiner's, are the right decisions, by the way. I mean, because with the axe in this movie, I don't think it would have been universally lauded as what might be the most painful depiction of violence on screen. And there's no blood. Right, I think that an axe, it just would have pushed it too far into just gratuitous nature.
This episode is brought to you by Peloton. The new cross-training series balances your workouts with 15-plus workout types for endless movements on and off your equipment. Stay motivated with weekly personalized plans that guide you from beginner to expert and push past your goals with routines tailored to you. Get the new cross-training series. Terms apply.
You'd almost feel like something out of a Grindhouse film, but while I'm on the subject, Misery, before Stephen King was outed as Richard Bachman, Misery was going to be a Richard Bachman book. So what occurs in the book, the hobbling of Paul Sheldon with an axe, that is such a Richard Bachman type of scene, just ridiculous violence and edge. But here, a sledgehammer... I think that it tells the exact same tale as the axe, but just without the gore. By eliminating the gore, it allows people to keep watching, and I want to say it kind of makes it more inviting, but it pulls people in because there's not gonna be blood, right? So it allows people to keep on watching, and it makes the scene that much worse to watch. You almost think that's not going to happen, or at least that he's not going to show you, but he does. Oh, Rob Reiner goes there. From the moment that she slowly places that board between his ankles, Rob Reiner has you, right? He has you. You are as captive as Paul Sheldon himself. In that moment, that whole scene, that you are Paul, right? So much of that is filmed from his perspective, looking at his legs, looking up at Annie. And you're helpless. Paul is helpless. We're all helpless. Like, we're screaming at the screen. And again, this is a scene at this point. It's 2015. The movie came out in 1990. As soon as the movie came out, it became instantly iconic. It has been parodied. It has gone down in the annals of cinematic history. So it's not as if I don't know what's not going to happen. I know exactly, what's going to happen. But even still, watching it, it's just, there is a power to that scene. There's something about that just makes it what it is. There's a reason why people talk about this movie. There's a reason why people talk about that scene. It's just so well done. You are, like I said, you are helpless against Annie Wilkes. And then she raises that hammer, she brings it down. And then props to whoever did the effects in this movie, because it's disgusting to even think about. The way Paul's foot bends when the sledgehammer hits it. I think that's the key right there. That is the punchline to the joke. That is that's the moment. If you didn't have that moment of violence, bloodless violence, by the way, if you didn't have that moment, I don't think that it would be as painful. And then, you don't see the bending of the other foot when she slams the sledgehammer. But the fact that he is just, can't even imagine. I can't imagine the pain that he's going through at that particular moment. But then she doesn't even waste any time. She just, boom, to the other one. And then you just, what's next? It's just that it's been so tense, what is going to happen next. Of course, it also works so well because we've seen just how destroyed his legs are at this point, and just the vulnerability, it's just everything about it, it doesn't matter that there's no blood. It is one of the most gruesome things that you're ever going to see on screen.
Forget everything you had planned for this weekend because you are sitting on your couch and winning from the comfort of your own home. I'm here with SpinQuest, where you can play hundreds of slot games, all the table games you love, and you could even win real cash prizes. New users, $30 coin packs are on sale for $10 at spinquest.com.
SpinQuest is a free-to-play social casino. Void where prohibited. Visit spinquest.com for more details.
So, I could talk, I guess, for another hour about that one scene, but I think that I have to move on. Around this time, Buster, the kindly sheriff, he's putting two and two together, realizing that the quote that he'd read in one of Misery's books, which is such a endearing aspect of the character, and having him read the Misery books, in bed next to his wife, and just their loving sparring back and forth. It makes the movie fun to watch. But the fact that he's able to put two and two together, realizing that the quote, that he had read a quote and he thought that he remembered from somewhere, and when he does a little bit of research, he realizes that Annie had used it when she was on trial, and it then, oh my God, it provides a moment that it's one of those, don't go in the basement, don't go in the attic, don't go in the barn. It's one of those scenes where you're just screaming at the screen. Don't go to the house is what we're screaming at the screen. Don't confront her, Buster. Don't confront her. And that's what he does. As Buster races down the driveway and he bursts into Paul's room with a syringe. Buster arrives at the house. And you know what? It's awful because how the story is going to end. That has to come down to Annie and Paul, and that leaves no room for Buster. He's too sharp to be fooled, so that he has to die. But for someone as sharp as he is, he's still pretty dumb for heading to the house of a woman who he suspects is a kidnapper and murderer. Buster and Annie, they do that dance, each one knowing, but both hiding. As I was watching, I just wanted the scene to end. I just wanted it to end because I knew he was going to die, and I didn't want to prolong his death anymore because I just really liked that character. And she gets him, she blows him away, and after she kills the kindly sheriff, she's about to kill Paul, who manages to convince her to let him live until after he finishes the book. She turns her back and he grabs the lighter fluid, the same lighter fluid that she had made him use to burn his untitled book. And it's a great touch that when the end comes, which is soon after, I talked a little bit before about how well Kathy Bates and Rob Reiner and William Goldman had crafted the cinematic Annie character, and how they had really captured all of the different mood swings that she has, because it's just interesting that of all of the different aspects of her personality, when it's time to kill her, when it's time for the final showdown, she's not depressed Annie, she's not manic Annie, she's not angry Annie, psychotic Annie. This is loving Annie, right? This is the one that treated him as best as she could. She's just so excited about the end of the book that you almost feel bad for her, but you still can't pump your fist in joy. You can't help but pump your fist in joy when he holds the flaming manuscript and brings the typewriter down on her head. And then it's on. It is a brutal, and I mean brutal, fight to the death. And it's just, there's a great scene. It might be my favorite scene in the movie, where he clearly he can't use his legs, but right, she's coming, and he grabs his leg with his hands, and he uses his hands to swing his lifeless leg in order to trip her, and she trips over his leg and she falls, and it's just a painful looking fall where she just smashes her head against the typewriter. And you think that she's done, but remember, it's 1990, and this is a day and age, around the time, and after of the postmodern horror movie, which, if you think that the creature or the monster or the villain is down, expect at least one resurrection, and that's what we get. She jumps on Paul, they start going at it again. He takes a pig statue and bashes her in the head, and that's Annie Wilkes. And as endings go, the ending, I mean, not the one that I just talked about, but the very end, that dinner or lunch when he goes to eat with his agent, it's perfect. It's perfect. Seeing Annie come to him, and, he's not freaking out or screaming, but just seeing her come to him just knowing that it's in his mind, knowing that he's escaped. He knows that he'll never really be able to escape. He'll never be able to get past this. And when the waitress says that she's his number one fan, it shows that Annie might be dead, but she'll never really be gone, because that demon, that spirit of fandom that had possessed her, lives on in all of the fans out there. And it opens up this story into a very real world where something like this could happen again to Paul or another creative type. And then boom, it ends. And we got some Liberace playing perfectly, by the way. So, final thoughts. Just a quick note before I get into the book versus the movie showdown. We have a couple of players here, and I guess this I've recently begun. Just so everyone knows, like I said earlier in the iTunes reviews, that based on that recommendation there for the Easter eggs, I just recorded yesterday my Tommyknockers, which was a lot longer than maybe you would expect from a review. It's actually one of my longer single book reviews, clocking in at like an hour 20 or something like that. But I said that was going to be the first time that you see the Easter egg section. But hey, you know what? I mean, I didn't label it Easter eggs, but I'll call it Easter eggs here. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's the first time we're seeing the Easter eggs section of the Stephen King cast found here within this particular movie review. So, Easter eggs, we have some Easter eggs here in the sense that we have some players that will go on to be in other Stephen King movies. First of all, we have Annie Wilkes herself, Kathy Bates, who will go from here and then star as Dolores Claiborne herself in Dolores Claiborne. Frances Sternhagen, who played Virginia in this movie, was also in the miniseries The Golden Years. And J.T. Walsh, he plays he's only in it for like one scene. He just plays a trooper, a state cop, and so he makes an appearance here. But he's gonna go on to play like the classic Stephen King small town alpha male. The right hand man of Leland Gaunt, the Igor to Leland Gaunt's Frankenstein, the Renfield to his Dracula, the one, the only first selectman of Castle Rock, Maine, Danforth Buster Keaton. Now this, look, Misery is an insanely tense movie, but there's times, and I'm not sure if it's because the sensibilities of 2015 are a little different from 1990, but there are scenes of tension in this movie, like where Annie just kind of pops up, like behind Buster, for instance, and there's like this dramatic flourish of music. It seems almost like a parody this day and age, which is just, it's a nitpick. I'm sorry for even bringing it up. It's a nitpick, but something that I just kind of want to point out that just shows how differently we make our movies nowadays. Because, like I said, it feels, if you were to parody what a thriller looks like, there's certain things that you would do, and that's definitely one thing that you would do. But regardless, the movie is just, it's so effective. It's really just timeless. So, which brings us to our book versus movie showdown. In the movie reviews, you know that I like to pit the movie against the book to see who comes out the absolute winner. So, the first thing that I want to bring up is Buster and Virginia, or just the cops from the book, because Buster and Virginia are not in the book, and in the book we have a couple occasions where the police come to the house. So when comparing these two aspects of the police, who's the better like set of characters, Buster and Virginia, or the cops whose name I don't remember? Clearly, I don't remember who their names are. I've talked about how much I like Buster and Virginia. Clearly, the answer is Buster and Virginia. I really like these two. Their chemistry is great. I like how frisky she is. It's just and how smart he is. Like, it's just, the two of them are so much fun to read. I would actually like a separate, like, ongoing series of movies where these two characters solve small town mysteries, in this nice Colorado town. And then we have the axe versus the sledgehammer. And again, I don't think it's too much of a surprise, but I'm going to go with the sledgehammer. I think that, like, for all the reasons that I said, it tones down the violence. It makes you keep on watching it. It forces you to keep on watching it. You don't have that initial, I gotta turn away, because it's just a sledgehammer. And it just, to me, it just seems that much more painful. And then we have the ending between the book and the movie. And the book, I'm going to go with the book because we're in Paul's head. It comes across as that much more triumphant and tense, and you're never quite sure if he's gonna be able to pull it off, and she just won't die, and then she's not even, like, she's able to leave the house, and she's gonna go into the barn, and she gets a gun, a chainsaw. She gets a chainsaw, and she's gonna come back before she dies. So I would just say that the end just has a little bit more of an edge to it that the book, that the movie was able to capture. So then we have Paul Sheldon himself, and this one's hard for me, guys, because, first of all, in the book, the book, I would say the book wins out. I don't even want to use those words, but the book has an advantage. There we go. The book has an advantage because and basically we're Paul, right? We're in his head so much, and James Caan does not have that luxury, right? So he has to be able to sell that character, and just the little things that he does, like how well he manipulates his body to look like, his lower extremities are completely shattered, every wince of pain. He does not portray the same amount of pain the same way. Like, there's all these, like, variations in how his body feels at that particular moment. He does a great job with that. For someone that was confined to a bed and confined to a wheelchair, he really was able to emote a lot. And then there's little things, just like the humor from the movie comes from his interaction with Annie Wilkes, and we see that edge. We see it when, after he gets the sledgehammer, we're able to let out a breath of relief, because when she sees him, she's in the yard with Misery the pig, she waves at him, and he's just like, F it, I don't care at this point, you can do what you want. So he just, like, flips her the bird. And he's just, like, sarcastic, and, like, there's, like, looks on his face, like the look on his face when the Novril, he pours it into her drink and she spills the drink, and he just sells it at that moment. And then, like I said, when he says, here's to Misery, so, even though we were in Paul's head in the book, it's hard to say that the book is better than James Caan's performance. So it's kind of a cop-out. I guess that I kind of have to go tie on that one. But with I'm having a moment. No, guys, I'm sorry. I'm gonna go with James Caan. I just convinced myself. I have it written down right here as tie, but I think that he did a phenomenal job with this role that required him to be able to do so much physically, even though he was playing a character that could not do things physically, and that must have been challenging. So I'm going to go with James Caan. And then Annie, I got to go Kathy Bates on this one. Between her love of Liberace, her line delivery, the pronunciation of not Dom Perignon, but, she pronounces it like Dom Perignon. Her childlike glee, the cock-a-doodle car, and, just the use of the sledgehammer, just how much of a whirlwind of emotions she was. I mean, it just has to be Kathy Bates. This was the role that made Kathy Bates Kathy Bates. It's a role, with such dangerous insanity. It kind of makes me want to see like a celebrity death match where Annie Wilkes goes head to head with Jack Nicholson's Jack Torrance. And, it doesn't matter, I don't think, that if he has the power of the Overlook behind him or not. If he were to step into a ring with her, I would put my money on Annie Wilkes. And that has everything to do with Kathy Bates' performance. And like I said, this is an iconic movie with perhaps one of the most famous scenes of all time. And it is very much because of Kathy Bates. So, just in terms of numbers, I went with the book on 1, and I went with the movie on the rest. So when it comes to the book versus movie, and if I'm just going to do it in terms of numbers, the movie just won out, guys. So, I wrote down, I said that I was going to say that it's a tie and it's a cop-out and I can't come down either way, but just looking at what we've got, Buster in Virginia, The Sledgehammer, Paul, and Annie. That's 4-1. So, hey, look at that. I didn't expect that to happen. So I would say that the movie is a better distillation of the story than the novel itself. Agree? Disagree? Let me know. Write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. So everyone, that's all that I have for now for this particular week. But make sure that you come back next week as I dive into the very, very, very much derided The Tommyknockers. Like I said earlier, I just recorded that episode yesterday, and it's a long episode. There's definitely there's a lot to that book that might not be on the surface. This is a novel that Stephen King personally has stated is his least favorite or worst book that he's written. It's a novel that I think tends to get made fun of a lot. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of wacky ideas in there, but there's some elements that are troubling and not disturbing, but just that make you read a little bit deeper because of some real life stuff that was occurring at the time. So I wound up having a lot to say about The Tommyknockers, a book that I really enjoyed revisiting. It's a novel that I just like, and I just want to put that out there because if anyone's still listening, I just felt that when I finished reviewing the Tommyknockers review, if anyone kind of tuned out of the review after listening for the first half an hour, you might think that I was coming down against the Tommyknockers, but there's just a couple sections where I definitely do point out some areas that are a problem. But I would say all in all, it's definitely worth a reading experience. So,
all right, everyone, that's all that I have for this week. I hope that you enjoyed this review of Misery, Rob Reiner's Misery. If you have any time on your hands, you can leave a review on the platform that you most are comfortable listening to the Stephen King Cast, which includes Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon. So whatever it is, or whatever you're using to listen to the Stephen King Cast, if you take a moment to leave a review, that would be really, really helpful. If you have left a review on one platform, leaving a review on another would also be really, really, really helpful to me. And as always, you can follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram, on TikTok and on Facebook. And if you want to share any thoughts that you have on Stephen King, write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com, as always. And that's about it for now. I hope that you enjoyed our time with Misery, and may you have long days and pleasant nights, and I'll see you here next time where MOON spells Stephen King Cast.